Mr. Frank.
You pull a rabbit out of your hat?
Mr. Frank. What would you say the definition of history is?
Help by being quiet.
Why is great man history problematic?
Maybe I'll get to that.
Oh, look at that white blur.
I have ears, you know. Aiden, you're not helping, Justin. Alright, so
Let me get into a better
we'll
position.
be discussing the beginning of the Second World War, in which anywhere from 60 to 80 million people died. Yes. So there are many approaches one can take to history. Andrew, sit down.
Schools of stuff.
That's our thought.
Andrew, got it. Can you close the
So there's many ways people can approach.
This is mostly useless.
Listen to him!
Was written when I'm speaking. So there's many different ways people can approach history, from an economic perspective, a psychological perspective, to analyzing it in the ways of systems interacting with other systems, as well as the general populace. And then, of course, there's great man history, which I think is diabolical. Next slide, please. So, I personally split the Second World War into two different theaters of war. Technically, there's, if you look at military historians, they'll say there's more theaters, but I like to keep it general. So I'd say the Afro-European theater, predominantly the fascist Italy and Nazi Germany fighting almost everyone else. And then in the Pacific, we have Japan literally fighting everyone else. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start with the Pacific theater because it's generally less talked about. Japan became an imperial power out of circumstances, really. They had their own personal history, as well as their foreign influence, as well as their unfortunate geography played a role in causing their imperial aggression. During the time that Japan invaded China, China's in the middle of a civil war between the nationalists and the communists. So in a way, Japan stopped the civil war not momentarily, for a period of time, so the two factions in China could team up against Japan. But then after the war ended, let's just say a great leap forward happened. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start the Japanese history in Sengoku Jidai. That picture is of Oda Nobunaga from the video game Civilization 5. I'm quite fond of playing as Japan. So the Sengoku Jidai is the period of the samurai. This is when, if you think of a samurai, you're probably thinking of sometime during the Sengoku period. I included a Wikipedia link. I'm not going to click on it, but just making you aware that it exists. Sengoku Japan has an incredible influence on our pop culture. For example, Darth Vader's helmet was based on a Sengoku period helmet. So I'm going to oppose. Oh, I'm sorry, Mitchell. So I'm going to oppose my morals when it comes to great man history and do some great man history. In particular, three men, and it's almost always men because of sexism. That first man is Oda Nobunaga. He was born to the Oda clan, but he came to power after his father died when Oda Nobunaga was only 26. So at 26 years old, he was already the head of one of the more powerful clans in his part of Japan. And back then, Japan was in a constant state of civil war, and that would last for the entirety of pretty much the Sengoku period. The second man is Toyotomi Hideyoshi.
Are you going to explain great man history? Because I heard that question.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to history.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, if you ever have a question, just raise your hand and ask
Kids, man.
What's great man history?
What's great man history?
Great man history?
What is great man history?
Let him answer one at a time.
Great man history.
No, what's great man history?
As the actions of great men. So, if you were to study Alexander the Great, that would be great man history. If you study Queen Victoria and what she did, that would be great man history. Great man history minimizes, straight up ignores sometimes the trade systems as well as the everyday lives of the various people.
So it's just studying really important people and what they did.
Well, no,
Yeah.
and how it affects
The great men of history are important and they should be mentioned, but I don't think it's the most ideal way to approach history because it focuses on too few people. I'm pretty sure 100 billion people have died in all of human history.
But essentially, you're saying that, okay, just trying to summarize, you're saying that great man history is not exactly the study of, it's not just the study of important figures, but it's saying it is the mindset that history happens because of the actions of these important figures, not because of the people
Yes, that's a good way of putting it.
who do what they say and support them.
That's a good way of putting it. So getting back on track, next person we'll talk about is Toyotomi Hideyoshi. So Oda Nobunaga was busy trying to unify Japan, and Toyotomi Hideyoshi was born basically a nobody. He polished the saddles for the Oda clan, but then he gained Oda Nobunaga's favor, and he began to rise through the ranks. Eventually, they became gay for each other. I'm not kidding you. This is true. They engaged in gay sex multiple times.
It's just two men enjoying each
Multiple
other's
times.
strength.
Toyotomi Hideyoshi and the picture man Oda Nobunaga.
fun. I look
No, they weren't. So after, basically Oda Nobunaga was betrayed and he committed seppuku, which is when one takes a sword and stabs himself in the stomach to kill themselves and march away. So Toyotomi Hideyoshi then took charge and he really unified Japan under his rule and then invaded Korea. Invading Korea is going to be a common theme here. This is the Imjin Wars. The war ended with the Japanese retreat after a tactical stalemate, which was caused because the Korean Navy really stopped the Japanese supply line with their turtle ships, and yes, they are called turtle ships. The last man we'll talk about of the Sengoku Jidai is Tokugawa Ieyasu. Tokugawa Ieyasu was born of the Machidara clan, but he changes his name like at least 4 times, so I'm just going to call him Tokugawa Ieyasu. Basically, back in this period of Japan and the subsequent period, the great families would take hostages. Yes?
Okay, I didn't mean to really interrupt you. Is this during the 1500s?
This is the end of the Sengoku Jidai.
Okay. Does it have to do with World War II?
I'm getting there.
Okay.
1600.
my.
Yeah, I don't see the
Yeah.
okay.
So
About
Toyotomi
heard things
Hideyoshi,
about
so Tokugawa Ieyasu was a hostage. So basically, his family sent him to live with another clan, so that other clan wouldn't invade and conquer the Machidara clan. Then, on October 21st, 1600, the Battle of Sekigahara. This is perhaps one of the single most important battles in not only Japanese history, but world history. Because it set the stage for, next slide please, the Edo period. Tokugawa Ieyasu basically betrayed everyone, and as a result, won the battle.
What's wrong with this?
Stop teaching. Thus creating the Tokugawa shogunate. The Tokugawa shogunate.
Are you looking for Georgia?
She's not here
Or
today.
should I-
It reminds. What did it do?
Sam, you're in big trouble.
So I was saying, the Tokugawa shogunate, led by the shogun of the Tokugawa family, was basically a new form of government in Japan, which replaced the emperor. Although by this time the emperor was already incredibly weak.
Sort of funny.
I forgot to mention in Sengoku period, the first Western period, the Portuguese, they introduced gunpowder. Then, white people too. Then, in 1635, the shogunate decreed Japan would enter a period of isolation, which essentially destroyed international trade, as well as kicked out all the Westerners and also all the Christians. Many Japanese Christians moved to either the Philippines or Portuguese Macau. Then an American man named Matthew Perry, not an actor, this is too early. He arrived and he basically bombed he like shot his cannons at Japan's some fortresses to force a trade negotiation.
1600. Oh,
No.
So basically, the Americans were using a policy they still use today. My guns are big, trade with me. Next slide, please. Meiji era. So after the showing how weak Japan had become, several factions in Japan pushed for a restoration of imperial power, and that emperor was Meiji. It's important to note that Japanese emperors change their names when they die. So Meiji is his posthumous name. He was in his life he was Mushito. So the Meiji Restoration really sparked Japanese nationalism, which made them become the first country in the world
This
to
is
have mandatory
fascinating.
elementary schooling. They also had mandatory military service. And then Japan became an empire and annexed Hokkaido, and they forced the king of Okinawa to abdicate. And then in 1905, perhaps my favorite war of all time, the Russo-Japanese War. Basically, Japan and Russia both wanted Manchuria, a part of China, and Korea to be in their influences. Japan offered Russia, we'll give you influence over Manchuria if you acknowledge our influence over Korea. Russia said no, so Japan attacked their fleet and defeated the Russians. This is the first time in modern history, I think since the Mongols, that an Asian power defeated a European power. Next slide, please.
Just have a question.
Yes.
Go back to your other picture. Is there a reason why he's trying to look like Tsar Nicholas II? Like
As Japan became more imperial and nationalistic, it took influences from European powers. Next slide.
European culture conquered Japan.
Until Japan bombed them, yeah. So as you can tell, Japan is oh, I'm sorry.
Guy.
Japan
Did you say Mr. Plummer?
has
Guys, be quiet.
Japan's geography is yes, sir.
Can I just get a drink, please?
When Derek comes back.
Keep going.
So basically, Japan has very few resources, especially oil. Japan has no oil, which is required for a World War II era fleet. Oil, crude oil, the stuff in like the Middle East. So as you can see, basically Japan needs other people to trade with them. Next slide, please. Japanese expansion. So in 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria. They did some questionable things. And by questionable, I mean war crime things.
Like what?
Killing people, basically.
Justin, you know Unit 731? Please tell me you know that.
Let's get that later.
Wait, if killing people is a war crime, doesn't that mean that
Like unarmed
who's
civilians.
fought in a war?
Unarmed
Yeah, that
civilians.
still happens in literally every war.
Intentionally unarmed civilians.
No.
That still happens.
War crimes are
Yeah,
everywhere.
but it's not a war
But like, there's this thing called victor's justice.
crime.
Basically, whoever wins the war decides what was righteous. Yes.
And it's also just kind of like that's like saying, yeah, like, oh, you know, that happens all the time. So it's like, murder happens all the time. It's fine now.
Yeah, it's the war.
Well, yeah, sure.
Alright, guys. And at this time, Japan was already in control of Korea. And then in 1937, Japan invaded. Eric can go now.
I didn't say that.
China, including Shanghai, which was a very humiliating defeat for the Chinese. And then on December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor happened. Japan surprise attacked the American naval base on Hawaii and Vietnam. Next slide, please. Post-World War II Germany. Terrible.
Not that
Sorry,
bad.
thought you were teaching us about World War.
it's turd.
That's the poo-poo. It's a poo-poo.
Basically, there was massive. Yes.
Why did they attack Pearl Harbor?
That's a good question. So as I said, Japan was oil dependent on other countries. And one of those countries was America. America, very much an empire. At this time, America was in control of the Philippines. And as Japanese expansion continued, the Americans felt threatened that their interests, resources, their interests in the Philippines would be threatened. So the Americans cut off Japanese oil, and Japan was upset by this, so Japan killed people. Next slide. Next slide actually as well. So fascism comes from Italy. This is Benito Mussolini. He created fascism. He basically wanted a new Roman Empire for Italy. Basically, he took power by marching on Rome and saying, I'm in charge now.
Caesar style.
Fascism is a style of government that is heavily focused on oppression. Like, oppression. Also, usually a right-wing fiscal tactics, yes?
What year is this?
This is in the early 30s.
Okay.
Next slide, please. The Second Italo-Ethiopian War.
What was the first one?
Like back in like colonial, like Grand Africa era. In 1935, Italy wanted to this time succeed in conquering Ethiopia and colonizing it, invades. At this time, Ethiopia had 3 tanks. The Italians had 795 tanks. Guess who won the war?
Ethiopia.
That's unfortunate. I wish Ethiopia won because as pictured is Haile Selassie, the final emperor of Ethiopia. Ethiopia was the only country in all of Africa to never be colonized by a European power. And now they're incredibly poor. There aren't happy endings.
So colonialism is a good thing?
No, because have you seen Somalia?
Yeah, they look like a good nice place.
Somalia
Why
conquered...
take my kids
Shut up! Let me talk.
You want to take your kids to
But wait a minute, how did Ethiopia lose if their special ability is they deal more damage in war against civilizations with more cities than them?
Very importantly, the Italians used mustard gas, which we learned about in the First World War unit, which was illegal.
Yes.
No, you can't do that.
filming
We also wrote Article 10 of the League of Nations, but it's League of Nations, and they don't really have any power. No?
Didn't Japan do like more illegal stuff, like way more illegal stuff?
It was less in the eyes of Western countries, so it gets less coverage, and therefore there's less information available on it that's in English.
But still,
You're wrong, bro.
No, it's right. It's just
excuse
for
me,
acquiring information is harder.
Yes, if the government is the one that sets the laws and the government uses the
I feel
mustard gas,
offended.
how is it illegal?
International law. Next slide.
But that doesn't exist.
Der Führer! So that's Hitler. Der Führer in Germany means the leader. So following his failed coup, which we saw in the movie, Hitler writes Mein Kampf, My Struggle, which is...
Nice struggle.
Yes. So, you know, the struggle is real in Nazi Germany.
Did he tell people to check their privilege?
You know it. No, he took their privilege.
Those hand gestures, though.
Yeah, I can imitate Hitler pretty well.
Do it.
Is that
No.
Charlie Chaplin?
No, I actually did that. So, after becoming chancellor in either 1932 or 1933, I forget, he declared himself dictator. He annexed his native Austria and Czechoslovakia, which had been basically... He didn't let him do that. Foreign powers didn't do anything. Particularly the Prime Minister of the British UK, Neville Chamberlain.
Neville.
Sorry. Arthur Chamberlain. His middle name is Neville. His middle name is Neville. It's unfortunate. Winston Churchill was trying to say, hey, Hitler's dangerous. And the Prime Minister was like, nah, but we just fought a war, we're all tired, and I'm incompetent. Next slide.
That's mean.
Man of Steel. This is Joseph Stalin. He's literally the worst.
That's rude. Stalin seems like a pretty nice guy.
There you see a
Look at how happy he looks in that picture.
Superman's Man of Steel.
3 quotes perfectly encompass how bad Stalin is. The first one is he can't even shoot straight. So in the Second World War, Stalin's son was captured by the Germans. Stalin refused a prisoner trade that would get his son free, and when his son tried to kill himself and failed, Stalin said he can't even shoot straight.
Aw.
So not only is Stalin the worst leader of all time, he's also the worst father of all time.
What an incompetent son.
What was the trade and exchange war?
Wait, is that how he like didn't kill himself? Because he missed?
Like, so have you seen Fight Club?
Oh no.
Okay, so in that, he shoots himself but doesn't die.
Oh.
It's also like 6 fighting.
It depends where you shoot.
Yeah, yeah.
Who did they ask him to exchange his son for? Because then, I mean, if they wanted him to give him like 5 high-ranked generals.
I think it was just some general, not general, like normal foot soldiers, like a larger quantity of them.
Did they usually trade POWs?
Jacob,
when
any
it's
normal
like the,
father would trade anything to get their son back.
When they're related,
He's the leader of a country. I don't want to think about it.
Doesn't matter, you're also their dad.
Yeah.
Was it dad?
Michelle, and
Yes,
she told me
exactly.
Little boast of Stalin.
that she like exchanged general for his son, and if the general was taken over, was taken prisoner, then that could have led to multiple deaths.
I don't think Stalin's that calculating and that nice. Stalin is terrible.
Stalin created
But he's also
China,
human.
yes?
No. He's a demon.
One death is a tragedy. 1 million is 1 million tragedies.
Stalin was also originally allied with Hitler, and when Hitler invaded Poland, they were allied. But then Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, which ultimately caused his downfall. It's
Like the movie.
downfall, like the movie. It is very possible that the Second World War in Europe would have ended with not Nazi victory, but Nazi dominance, had they not invaded the Soviet Union. Next slide. Franco, Real Madrid, and bombs. So that is Francisco Franco, the fascist dictator of.
Related to James Franco?
No.
Obviously.
Well, we're all related as humans, but like directly, doubt it. So the Spanish Civil War was very much similar to the proxy wars of the Cold War. On one side, the communists were being supported by Stalin, and the fascist side, the other side of the Civil War, was being supported by Hitler and Mussolini. Franco won. Yes?
Aren't you doing some great man history by saying that that the leaders of the countries, not the countries themselves, supported the different sides?
Ruining my
of the war?
camera angle.
You can't generalize what an entire country believes in.
Well, would it be the economic government of the
Because I don't
country?
think me and Glenn have the exact same ideals, but I think we are both in this country.
But still, if the Canadian government were to support something, that would be the same.
the majority of the choices.
No,
Not
I'm not saying that. You would say if
I need a swivel chair
Reflected
so I can easily change my camera
I think the
angle.
Canadian government does, but not Canada.
So considering
That's true, they do represent us in a sense, but even if we don't.
I like to not believe that.
I don't say the German or Italian people because fascist Italy and Nazi Germany were totalitarian regimes. The will of the people was not the will of the government. The will of the government, and mainly Hitler, was demanded of the people.
Germany just wanted food, and then they were listening to Hitler.
I'm getting to that.
Nazi Germany got a lot of support.
They got a lot of support. But
Because
they're
they were brainwashed.
No, but also because, as I mentioned before, Germany was incredibly poor. Hitler, terrible person, very good at getting a country out of economic troubles. For example, he did a number of things that made Hitler's actions, in a sense, in a very small sense, but still noteworthy, made it possible for West Germany to become a valuable commodity for the Americans and the British. And also the French, but they're French. Not done. So why are they in Real Madrid? Franco supported the Real Madrid, and he made a law that only the Spanish soccer teams could only have Spanish players, except for Real Madrid, who could have whoever they wanted. Next slide. So speaking of food, le restaurant, I didn't pronounce it very well, I don't speak German. The German word for habitat, or literally living space. And we're really taught from a young age that the Second World War was a righteous battle between the good Allies and the evil Axis. And well, both sides committed war crimes, and the Axis committed more war crimes. That doesn't explain why we get the war. Because, as I mentioned before, the Italians were using illegal and horrible methods against the Ethiopians. But the European powers didn't do anything. Governments, particularly empires, need resources. Whether the resources are oil, like we see with America today, or if we talk back more than still oil, but especially food. Salt. Yeah, salt's not as important, but salt's pretty important, especially if you're Indian. Shout out my man Gandhi. Sugar, especially in plantations in Latin America, the Caribbean, yeah. Chocolate. Yeah, there's a lot of chocolate exportations, which is why you see free trade being so highly coveted by people who don't know what free trade means. Yes?
Did they have trouble with like scurvy or anything during the World War II? Because they did have.
It's quite possible they did, but I've never like come across it as like a big, large-scale thing.
You only usually get scurvy if you just.
Vitamins.
Yeah, it's
C
but like
makes
the
it.
soldiers wouldn't have time to get fresh fruit and vegetables to eat, so. But it probably just goes.
Do you know how hard it really is to get scurvy? Because like I don't eat oranges and I barely eat fruit. I don't have scurvy.
Do you take vitamins?
As far as
Please don't take vitamins. Like unless you're like medically advised by a doctor,
You're just
don't
have
take
expensive
supplements.
hits.
And I take like 5 multivitamins a day just to relax.
Do not do that.
Look at
Well,
okay.
Please let me die. I take more.
Depends which vitamins. Just
I ingest about 5,000 milligrams of acetaminophen a day.
Fat soluble, it depends.
Yeah.
I'm not talking just about like bad for your health. I'm talking like in terms of the economy. You're giving money to corporations who are exploiting people's
World
ignorance.
War II.
Yeah, I agree with Justin.
So, my final, as you can see on this, my final bullet is things. This hasn't changed. When you look at the current situation in the Middle East, resources play a big role. The Western powers want to protect their resources, and the factions in the Middle East want to have resources from the Middle East stay in the Middle East generally.
Now we're fighting terror. Your facts straight.
That's what they want you to think. So basically, this is important if you look on your handout, the final question. So, when you talk about why Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, you definitely hear a lot about living space. They didn't invade Russia or the Soviet Union like the Mongols did for glory. Or, well, not really for glory. I probably shouldn't have said that. I forget I said that. But it really is heavily resource-based. In fact, generally all wars, especially in the modern age, are resource-based. Next slide. No, go back. So that's a painting about Manifest Destiny, which is when the Americans moved from the East Coast westward. It is very similar. Next slide. So this is a picture taken in 1939 in September in Poland. On September 1st, 1939, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union headed team invaded Poland. Warsaw fell in 48 hours. The Nazis used a tactic called Blitzkrieg, which literally translates to lightning war. It uses mechanization of troops and heavy, heavy bombing. The tactic
Bombing.
I mispronounced it. Deal with it.
I love bombing.
Heavy, heavy bombing.
This tactic was made worse by how ill-prepared the Polish army was. Now, the picture is captioned, "Sister, why don't you speak?" It was taken by an American photographer in Warsaw, and he was a war correspondent. The invasion of Poland sparked the Afro-European theater to erupt in conflict. But by the end of this 2-week span, Canada, France, Great Britain, like basically the Netherlands, Belgium, some other countries too, were at war. Hitler would then later invade Denmark and Norway, but not Sweden. Sweden stayed neutral, in part because they gave resources to Nazi Germany. Later, as mentioned before, in 1941, the bombings of Pearl Harbor would bring our full thoughts of World War II into being. And on August 6th, 1945, well, let's just say Hiroshima. So,
The war ended with a bang.
some of you may be thinking why I started so far back with the Japanese history. The actions performed today, seemingly meaningless, have an unknowable and a very valuable impact on the future. It's sort of like when you hear about in science fiction, when you go back in time and step on a butterfly, and as a result, the Soviet Union won the Cold War. It's not that extreme, but it is still kind of true. Every action, so we're getting into physics here, so every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Everything performed will have consequences on the future. The actions of the past continue to affect today. There's a really great quote from this Chinese guy. He was in the Chinese government. I forget what his position was or his name, but when he was asked what he thought the effects of the French Revolution were, he said, perhaps one of the single most enlightening quote about history. He said, "It's much too soon to say." Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Questions?
Questions? Everything.
Unfortunately,
No offense to Simon.
Yeah, I like that too.
I just felt like it was slightly more captivating because he had a broader range of history, and then he sort of tied it all together.
And he didn't even cover anything about Canada, which we're studying.
Yeah.
And I wanted to allow you to
Boring
one.
He gave me some of that Japanese history, which is super important.
Yeah, no, that would be good. Yeah. Actually, that was everything in about the events leading up to World War II.
Can we watch the Hitler movie now?
No one really wants to separate from.
I am.
Don't you have questions for me?
The only reason.
Why do you play as Japan?
Because I like to win wars. That's it.
Yeah, but like, if you play as Arabia, then you get a billion monies, and then you go to war and you just buy a military, and it's just you win with your army of mercenaries.
But Japan has the,
Bushido thing isn't worth it.
I also like music.
Are we done?
That's a good
I
point.
go through. I'm currently going through playing all the saves. I'm at I want to say this is Roman. The Ottoman Empire. Any other questions? Thomas.
Do you, not sound related, but what do you think about Japanese isolationism in the modern day?
Japan continues to have this very weird kind of xenophobic culture. There's these stories of like Japanese Canadians returning to Japan and being like physically assaulted because they don't speak Japanese. For example, David Suzuki is incredibly unpopular in Japan. Yeah, because like he doesn't speak Japanese. Like if I went to Japan, I would never mention I'm part Japanese because like it wouldn't go well. I don't speak Japanese.
Sounds like mentioning your 1/16th chair.
Except, are you at risk of being physically assaulted?
Yes.
Are you in Japan?
If it's Jacob Larson, it's a chair.
I went to Japan.
I'm 1/16 for Cherry?
They didn't even
There are
start
stories
filming
now.
No,
Do you actually know how incredibly racist it is?
it ain't over till it's over.
Like if you're black and you go there like more than 6 hours on river.
Everybody, Bo has a question.
What do you think about Manchuria?
What about
Your
it?
opinion about Manchuria?
It exists.
It's very wise.
They're fine.
Anyway, what's your opinion about like the anti-Japanese like fever in Asia?
Like the sentiments are obviously still strong, but in our modern day of globalization, I think we should focus less on arbitrary lines on the map and focus more on the fact that we're all human and our planet is dying and we really need to fix that. And the most effective way is by international collaboration.
We should have a new.
Yeah, Eric.
What do you know about Albanian history?
Almost nothing.
What do you know?
I know it exists, and that's about it.
Your bank, European history doesn't matter. Wow.
Gross.
Maybe you can enlighten me.
Hey Justin, can we watch the Hitler
Well, I
movie?
know one thing. That like there was this one guy.
It always
a
begins
while
with that.
ago. His name was like Skunderbell, and he like him and like an army with a bunch of Albanians took like not really like to take over, but they sort of like drove the Ottoman Empire out of their own homeland, and they kind of like battled them.
So like the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Oh no, this was like long time ago actually. Maybe
No,
1500s,
like
1400s.
like 1900 is over 100 years ago. So that's kind of
What's the thing with like Bismarck?
I love Bismarck. He's so cool.
Stop asking useless history questions.
No,
Let's watch the
because
Hitler
it's-
movie.
Bismarck basically kept Germany alive in its infant days. There were two very powerful empires running it. Both France and Russia.
Can we watch the Hitler movie?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna sit with the
Bismarck.
Bismarck is the.
I'm with you, Bob.
Guys, stop speaking over my professional film.
I'll talk about Japan.
Can I stop recording?
I mean, it was really
Can I please stop recording?
Yeah,
covered everything, but I just thought.
We did it.